Now war arose in heaven, Micheal and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who was called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. So we see the next scene here is essentially a scene of response to Satan's failure to stop the Christ. After Christ ascends to heaven, and through his redemption and his salvation brought upon by his sacrifice, we see that war breaks out, because no longer does Satan have a role to play anymore. Because of the acts of Christ, Satan the accuser, because that's actually what the word Satan means. In Hebrew, ha-satan, which is what his name is in Hebrew, means accuser. So Satan, what his job was, in a way, is he accused the elect of God of all of their sins to God. He would stand there and go, Look, God, look where they failed. Look where they fell. Look at Trey, he's sinning all the time, right? His job was to stand before God and go, Look at how horrible your people are. But because of Christ and his redemption and his redemptive work, no longer does he have that place to stand. He has no longer that pedestal to stand on and go, well, look how bad your people are. Because he can't point at them anymore, because they are saved through the Lamb. And so, in order for him to do that, he would actually have to be accusing Christ of sinning, which is impossible. So he no longer has the job of being the accuser anymore, and he is fully thrown down, and he has nothing to do. And we see this as the war breaking out in heaven between Micheal and his angels and Satan and his angels. And at the end of this, though, we do get the warning. We get a grave warning that Satan is angry because he knows his time is short.
Talking about this lifetime? Like when it says time is short, are you talking about this lifetime?
Yeah, like that Satan's time is short, because from this point on, he only has this amount of time to do what he's going to do before Christ returns. Because once Christ returns, it's game over for him. He's lost fully. He's thrown into the pit, and he has no power anymore. And so he is angry, and he is essentially waging war on us, on the church, because he knows he doesn't have much time left. And so that moves us into the final assault of the dragon. So that would be verses 13 through 17. If you change the slide for me. All right. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle, so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nourished for a time, and times, and half a time. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, to sweep her away with the flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. So now we see the anger of the dragon actually coming to fruition, where he tries to turn his anger to the woman. We see here the dragon, after the fall, he turned his gaze to just destroying the church. But he is unable to do so. He is unable to fully destroy the church. So then what does he do after that? We then see that he pours water out of his mouth to try to get rid of the church with a flood. What does the water represent? These waters coming out of his mouth represents the lies and the deceptions that he uses to try to lead the church away. trying to lie and deceive the church so that the elect may not believe. But he's unable to do so. But we see that that only the world is the one that soaks up these lies and deceptions. That the true church still remains. So this ends with the devil resulting to making war on the individual believers themselves. Since he can't remove the church, he's going to wage war on the individuals. And here, I want to take a moment, if you change the slide for me, to talk real quickly about a little bit of the numbers that we've been seeing. So we saw previously the 1,260 days. In all these chapters, we have the same following order of this. So in chapter 11, we saw that the two witnesses prophesied for 1,260 days. These are also the same numbers so that we see over and over. These days are not literal days, but representative of the gospel era. We see this in multiple ways. So it's labeled as 42 months. The 1,000-year period, a time in times and half a time, and 1,260 days. And so we see the same numerology over and over, and this is representative of the gospel era. So back when we were looking at the two witnesses, the witnesses are preaching and proclaiming the gospel during the gospel era, which is now. So what we see here is that God is protecting his church during the gospel era, which is now, during the 1,260 days, and he is nourishing her in the wilderness. So even though Satan is attacking the church, God is still there nourishing the church with his word and with his promises and with his hope that he gives. We're still being nourished with the manna of heaven, the word of God, during this whole time, no matter what assaults the devil is bringing upon us. But in all these sections, we do see a very short period of time, always seems to be described as 3.5 days, where Satan essentially, for all intents and purposes, seems to win. There's always a short period of time. We saw it with the two witnesses, where there seemed to be a time where they thought they killed the witnesses, and they were rejoicing because of it. And even here, there seems to be a time when he's attacking the individuals of the church, where he seems to think that he wins. But then what always comes after this very short period of time, where he thinks he's won, is judgment. Christ returns every time, and that's the constant theme that we see in all of these when it comes with these numbers, is that we have the representing of the gospel age, and then we have the representing of the short period of time where Satan wins. But I wanted to point this out because as we go into the next chapter, it's described as the beasts having authority to reign for 42 months. And that's also during the gospel age. So it's important to note that the same time that we have the beasts that are also trying to lead the world astray and lead destruction, God at the same time is nourishing his church during that same period of time as well. So you have both things happening at the same time.